Okay, it looks like we have 10 a.m. Pacific time where I am, 1 p.m. Eastern if you are there. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Office of Professional Services and Human Capital Categories office hours. My name's Alyssa Wong, and I'll be hosting today's session. Today's topic is on scope review, best practices. The Office of Professional Services and Human Capital Categories office hours is an open forum for federal acquisition professionals to ask contracting questions and learn various ways to support their professional services acquisition using GSA tools and resources. Before we begin today's session, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. Please note today's meeting is being recorded. If you wish to opt out, you may do so at any time, and all phone lines will be muted during the presentation. Please use the Q&A pod at the bottom of the screen to ask your questions. We'll answer your questions during and after the presentation, and if we run out of time, we'll do our best to respond to them following the webinar. Today's presentation was sent out to all registered attendees prior to the event. Please check your inbox for an email from PSHC events at gsa.gov. If you're unable to locate it, please email pshcevents@gsa.gov and we'll provide you a copy. You can also download today's presentation directly from within the chat box, and this feature will only work if you're using the Zoom app and not the online version. Also, today's webinar will be posted on PSHC YouTube playlist office hours in about 3 weeks. Lastly, you'll receive one CLP for today's webinar. Those will be emailed to you within the next 7 to 10 days. If you don't need to provide an email address or any of that info today to receive a CLP, as the Zoom registration process has captured all of that. And if you don't receive a CLP within some 10 days, please email pshcevents@gsa.gov. Finally, a post-event survey will be emailed to everyone on today's call. We kindly ask that you take a few minutes of your time to fill that out to improve our office hours in the future. Now I'm going to get started by introducing our presenters today, Brittany Black and Jay Pang. Brittany is an acquisition professional with 17 years of federal service. Over the past 4 years, she's been with GSA and currently serves as one of GSA's professional service advisors, and also known as PSA. In this role, she's responsible for providing professional service acquisition support to the Department of the Army, Department of Justice, USAID, and Department of Treasury. And Jay, he's been with GSA for 8 years and started his GSA career as an acquisition project manager. And he also currently serves as the professional service advisor for PSHC. He spent a large part of his career conducting IT operations for the intelligence community and concurrently serving as a Army National Guard medevac pilot. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brittany and Jay to get us started today.
All right, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you all for joining us today for our scope review presentation. As Alyssa mentioned, I'm Brittany Black, and I have my colleague Jay Pang with me today, and we'll be providing today's training. So our team reviews hundreds of statements of work and performance work statements every fiscal year. This fiscal year alone, we've reviewed and conducted over 300 scope reviews that span across all federal agencies to include DoD and independent federal agencies. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. All right, this is today's agenda. We're going to discuss what a scope review is and how it can be helpful to you, what key information we ask for, how we use it, GSA solutions and resources, and how your requirements may fit within them. And lastly, we'll have time at the end for Q&A, but feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box as we go along. Next slide. All right, first we'll discuss what a scope review is, talk a bit about the process, and discuss why scope reviews are important. So let's get into it. Next slide, please. All right, for many of you on the call, I'll assume that you're acquisition professionals in some sort of capacity. Whether you're a contracting professional or a program manager, you can definitely benefit from today's training. If you're unfamiliar with scope reviews, a scope review is a process used to determine whether a particular service requested by a federal agency falls within the scope of an existing GSA solution. It's a step that can be taken in the market research phase of your acquisition and as an added benefit in developing your acquisition strategy. And scope reviews are also no cost to you. They're absolutely free. So it's a free service offered to you. Category management principles tell us that we should seek out already established contract vehicles when they exist and make sense to use. Forming an acquisition strategy includes confirming and acknowledging possible existing contract solutions that may already cover the scope of your requirement. And this is why obtaining a scope review can be beneficial. It helps you better navigate what types of existing GSA contract solutions are already available and that may be a fit for your requirement. Service contracts to include interagency contracts have changed over time, and multiple award schedule consolidation and new contracts such as Oasis Plus have been stood up. So in some cases, the purpose and capability of many interagency contracts is not always clear and obvious. Scope reviews help alleviate areas of uncertainty. In doing so, we take a look at your statement of work, your IGE, your NAICS code selection, period of performance, suggested contract type, etc., when conducting a scope review. These elements provide a holistic review of your requirements, so we're able to effectively assist in helping you determine a way forward with your acquisition. We want to dive into all of these elements to ensure we provide the best possible response and solution for your requirement. And having a third party or outside agency review your requirement can often shed light on gaps or problem areas that may need to be addressed and help solidify a way forward. Next slide, please. So in this next slide, we're going to discuss what a scope review is not. So a scope review is not an automated process. Now, if you work with your local GSA Customer Service Director or CSD, you may have heard of Market Research as a Service tool, or MRAS. MRAS provides automated RFIs for services and advanced GSA product searches. The MRAS tool gives you the opportunity to conduct market research through requests for information, product market research, and rapid reviews. These MRAS entries are based on customer inputs, and the contractor recommendations may not necessarily be best suited for your particular requirement. On the other hand, a scope review is conducted by a professional service advisor, or PSA, and we review all documents individually and in detail. So as I mentioned previously, service contracts can be very complex in nature and require some in-depth analyzing. That's what a scope review can accomplish. So to be clear, MRAS is an automated process, not a scope review, but it is an alternate way to obtain valuable market research via GSA. Another thing that a scope review is not is a binding determination of scope. It is merely a recommendation from GSA to match your requirement to solutions that we manage. Keep in mind that the decision always lies with the ordering contracting officer and is their responsibility to determine what contract solution to use. There could be an instance where we determine your requirement to be a match for a particular GSA solution, but there are internal policies within your agency that require you to analyze a different solution or utilize a different solution or contract vehicle. There also may be instances where you, the requiring activity, are aware of additional information that we may not be privy to or scope changes that we may not be aware of. This is why we say scope reviews are good recommendations, but not a binding determination of scope. And lastly, a scope review is not a recommendation for a specific contractor. The result of a scope review will identify a particular professional services contract vehicle or solution. Those solutions may be Oasis Plus, the Multiple Award Schedule, or HCATS. We will recommend domains within Oasis Plus or specific special item numbers or SINs under the Multiple Award Program. that we determine to be the best fit. We may provide some data based on various industry partners, but that doesn't mean that we're recommending a particular contractor. Next slide, please. All right, so we've gone over what a scope review is and what it's not. Now I want to discuss scope. What exactly is the scope of a requirement? Now, by definition, scope defines the boundaries and parameters of what's included or excluded in a specific requirement. The scope should tell us what needs to be accomplished and what do we need the contractor to do. Keep in mind that the scope of all requirements will be different. Here on the screen, we have taken a few examples that we've seen from actual statements of work, or PWSs, that have come through the scope review tool. The first example reads, as stated above, the intent of this work is to identify population boundaries, quantify diversity statistics, population parameters, such as effective population size, and in some cases, species diagnostic markers. Species to be examined include cisco, lake whitefish, mussels, and lake trout. Now, the second example on the screen says this PWS establishes the requirement for contractor provided solutions in support of OCIO. The contractor shall provide all personnel, supervision, and other services necessary to perform the work as defined in this PWS in support of the agency's OCIO. Now, from a reviewer's perspective, I can look at example 1 and more than likely provide a recommendation pretty quickly due to the specifics of what's needed. With example 2, I would have to make a lot more assumptions. I know that it's for services within the OCIO office, but there are no specifics. There's a lot of gray area. So of course, these are merely examples of different scopes, and we would have to review the statement of work in its entirety, but you can see that the more details provided within the scope makes it clearer as to what needs to be accomplished. A clear scope is also beneficial to industry partners as well. Now, if these two scope of works were sent out via an RFI, a request for information, or as an actual solicitation, a company would be able to clearly delineate whether they can provide the requested services in example 1. Example 2 may be a bit more broad and take more time for industry to determine if they would be able to meet the government's need. Most federal PWSs or statements of work include a section for scope, nestled in between the background and performance requirement sections. So sometimes this can be very informative, and other times, which we can see from these two examples, it may not. Next slide. Now I want to briefly discuss why we recommend a scope review in the first place. In general, it can be an important step in your market research process and for creating your acquisition strategy. But there are other things that a scope review can assist with. First, it can assist with avoiding risk, in particular protests. A scope review confirmation can help you prevent the risk of protests due to a solicitation being out of scope of the contract to which it has been solicited. For example, under our Oasis Plus MAC contract, task order protests cannot be filed if the overall value is less than $10 million, unless the RFP was out of scope. So in this case, if you issue an Oasis Plus RFP for a requirement valued less than $10 million, and its principal purpose is, say, for example, IT, that would be out of scope because the principal purpose of an Oasis Plus task order should be professional services. In this case, a protest could be filed. Now, if a scope review was completed before issuing the RFP, the scope review team would have noted that discrepancy and made another contract vehicle recommendation, more than likely in this case, an IT-based solution. Now next, scope reviews assist in industry participation. Our team tries to point you in the right direction when it comes to determining the appropriate SIN, domain, or NAICS for our solutions. For example, there may be an instance where you have a particular SIN category in mind that you believe is the most appropriate for your requirement. So let's say you have an environmental engineering requirement, and the requiring activity only considered special item number 541330 ENG, which is engineering services. Within the mass schedule, we also support SIN 541620, which is environmental consulting. This SIN also encompasses industry partners with engineers as part of their staff. So if you are unfamiliar with that SIN and did not submit for a scope review, you would not be aware of the vendors within SIN 541620 and potentially miss out on more applicable pool of vendors capable of meeting your agency's needs. So in this case, a scope review would absolutely help you determine the most appropriate SINs to ensure your requirement reach the industry partners with the most potential. And the last recommendation for submitting a scope review is the subject matter expert involvement. So as stated before, scope reviews are conducted by SMEs, by real people from our contract programs team. Our team of PSAs manage the scope reviews tool for OASIS Plus, HCATS, and professional services side of the multiple award schedule program. So when you request a scope review and choose the contract solution you're interested in, the submission will be sent to the appropriate team of SMEs. We also coordinate with one another in order to provide the requester the best recommendation. Now, there have been times where we've received professional service scope review requests, and after reviewing the statement of work, it's determined that the requirement appears to be more IT-based. In these cases, we will collaborate with our ITC team and have them review the requirement to obtain their opinion as well. So having GSA as an outside agency with specialized knowledge of our contract solution review your requirement may help eliminate potential areas of deficiency or risk. Next slide, please. All right, now that we've discussed the basis of what a scope review is, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague and fellow PSA, Jay, to talk a little bit about key information as it relates to scope reviews.
Thank you, Brittany. In this key information fact on page, we're going to talk about multiple factors and how we incorporate those multiple factors and bits of information to ultimately provide you a scope review. And in the next slide, this is basically a checklist for us. This is a good representation of what we do, what we look at, and these are the important factors that we incorporate to provide you a scope review. And of course, having more information on these 5 bullets will help with the scope review process. But if you only have purview to a certain parts of this information, we can work with that. Generally speaking, we'll work with the customer to see what information they have already and how we can use that to provide a detailed scope review. And starting at the top, NAICS and or accurate PSC. Having a NAICS or PSC designated for a requirement will help with determining the scope of a requirement, as most NAICS and PSCs fit into an understandable bucket such as engineering, consulting, research and development, and so on. However, this gets a little bit trickier for services requirement that aren't narrowly defined. For example, NAICS 541611, which you'll hear multiple times throughout this presentation, which is Administrative Management and General Management Consulting, or 541990, which is all other professional, scientific, and technical services that are non-IT. As you can tell, these 2 NAICS have a very broad description and can cover a lot of different types of work and environment. And that goes on to the next bullet, background and information. To better understand the scope of the requirement, it may be helpful to take a look at the background of the requirement in order to better understand the agency's mission. We understand different agencies have different requirements. For example, general consulting for a civilian agency such as Department of the Interior may differ from general consulting related to a military training program analysis, yet they may both be defined by 541611 or R425. Understanding the background or mission will help with the next item on the checklist, which is subject matter expertise. Notice I said expertise and not expert. For this instance, when I refer to subject matter expertise, I'm not talking about a particular individual or labor category that meets the experience qualification of a SME, but rather the familiarity that contractors as a company will need in order to meet the needs of the government. Even without a known NAICS or PSC, an understanding of the agency's particular background or mission can help us consider the type of subject matter expertise a contractor will need for a particular requirement. Going back to our two examples that Brittany mentioned, the requirement scope, example one, clearly spelled out the need of a subject matter expertise in the biological research realm. And sometimes a variety of work may be narrow and clearly demonstrate the scope. Oftentimes the requirement will cover many different service areas, and it may be necessary to break down the requirement into different service area components to address the complete scope. This can be particularly important when considering mass-based solutions, which may involve several different SINs. It may not be as important for MAC or GWAC-based solutions. However, the primary purpose NAICS that's eventually agreed upon should be supported by a combination of the breakdown of the variety of work, mission space, and labor categories. We'll touch on those three a little more in detail on a later slide. And lastly, if there are known labor categories for a requirement, they can often help a reviewer understand the functional role of a personnel, which can be directly reflective of the scope itself. For instance, a data analyst that will be reviewing supply budget is different from a data analyst that will be reviewing emerging trends in energy efficiency. Those more narrowly defined labor categories will help better define what may be a possible solution. And let's move on to some descriptive examples on the next slide. Some examples, good examples provided by our customers in their procurement needs. The first one, background. Background example is from PWS for EPA Climate Protection Partnership Division. It's pretty straightforward that their background mission is to explore opportunities for reducing emissions and energy waste from the energy sector, and gives few points to help the reader understand the objective task, such as improving the efficiency of energy generation, replacing carbon-intensive fuels, and so on. And in the next bullet, expertise, the expertise example is from a requirement for Army Force Com. This example does a good job on defining the requirement for aviation logistics and providing tasks associated with aviation logistics to help clearly define what the government is looking for. And moving on to the third item, which is labor. The labor example is from DOJ, U.S. Marshal Services Office of Finance. Generally speaking, most of us have an understanding of what an accountants do, right? However, there are several different types of accountants in different industries, such as forensic accountant, auditor, management accountant, etc. And I believe this example does a good job in identifying the expected tasks that the senior accountant will be performing for DOJ. Once again, these examples are great examples of what information we use to build the scope review. And you can say this is kind of the trifecta information for us when we do our reviews. In conjunction with background expertise and labor categories, we also consider other factors, which we'll discuss on the next slide. Here, we have 5 bullets that we also consider, or 5 factors. And in conjunction with the background expertise and labors, as discussed in the previous slide, we also consider these factors for the scope review. Contract type is an important piece of information as it may eliminate possible solutions that would otherwise be considered within scope of a requirement. This is common with multiple award contracts, or MACs, where the requirement is within scope, but the agency needs a BPA or IDIQ type of contract, which cannot be done under FAR 16 IDIQs like OASIS Plus and HCATS. Likewise, the commercial and non-commercial requirements. Non-commercial products or services are out of scope of the MASS program, and we'll need to consider FAR 16 solutions like OASIS Plus or HCATS. And moving on to ODCs, the amount or value of ODCs need to fulfill a requirement may also place it out of scope on one contract or another. MASS is limited to 33% of the value of the entire order when using OLMs. But some ODCs may be scheduled items under a SIN like 541810 ODC, while any number of ODCs are allowed under OASIS Plus or HCAS orders as long as the principal purpose is still within scope. And moving on to the next bullet, which is period of performance. Period of performance is to see what solutions can support the life cycle of a requirement. We kind of went through this drill or this process while we were sunsetting OASIS and when we were also conducting the phase rollout of OASIS Plus. And the last bullet, type of work. Certain types of work will also put some requirements out of scope of GSA solutions, including personal services, Davis-Bacon Act, which is related to construction, Brooks Act, or other restrictions such as transport and or disposable of radioactive materials. So as mentioned, the information on the previous slide with these other factors is a kind of the multiple layers of a scope review process and the information we use to provide you with our review. And moving on to the next slide, we'll talk about some solution relationships, how all this ties together, your requirement, our review with the solutions available and the industry that supports it. And here's what we need to know about our scope, understanding what's covered. In this slide, let's discuss the factors involving NAICS-based contracts, defining SIN, and sources you can access to get the information you are looking for. Orders must be based on an assigned NAICS. In the case of OASIS Plus and HCAS, the principal purpose NAICS must match with a NAICS assigned to those contracts. MASS is a little more flexible. While SINs do have NAICS associated with them, there is overlap among SINs, and the scope of a requirement may still be applicable to a SIN even if the NAICS don't quite match. 541611 is a good example of this overlap. Keep in mind that most SIN and domain descriptions are not all inclusive. For example, real estate services are covered under a variety of financial services SINs. However, nowhere in the SIN description is the term real estate mentioned. And certain SINs do include limitations or restrictions that you should be mindful of, such as remediation, which do not allow services such as asbestos mitigation, lead paint abatement, and similar type of work. Since some SINs are broadly defined, GSA MASS has implemented subgroups for some SINs to help narrow the scope of the available service. Inclusion in these subgroup is voluntary on the part of the contractors, and not all contractors have opted to select subgroups. Therefore, they may be useful for market research, but should not be used as a down select method for source selection. As an example, SIN 541611 has subgroups like acquisition grant management support, facilitation surveys, program evaluation service, along with a few other subgroups. And if you're still not able to find the information you're looking for in a SIN or domain description, you can always go to the source. And in this particular slide, we have sam.gov and eLibrary available. But I'll also share with some resources on another slide that'll include some additional resources. But eLibrary, we PSAs use that on a daily basis, and it's kind of our go-to source. If we got to start somewhere, we generally start with eLibrary. But all the other tools that I'll mention, we routinely use as well too, and so can you. And in the next slide, I'll share some of that information or resources with you. You can get access to capabilities as well as terms and condition and information on labor categories through eLibrary and Advantage. Once again, eLibrary, Advantage, our go-to tool that we use on a daily basis. Very helpful to you and your agency during market research as well too. OASIS Plus information can be found in the GSA website, and you can also monitor OASIS Plus Interact site for the latest information and changes pertaining to OASIS Plus. eBuy Open is where you can access RFQ and RFP information submitted through GSA eBuy system. It allows users to search, filter, and analyze procurement data that may be helpful for your research. And industry communication can be achieved by RFIs and market research as a service, MRAS. As Brittany mentioned, that you could coordinate with your customer service director to use. And it's a great tool, very, very light, very well used tool in the GSA resource arena. And in the next slide, I'll share with you some example of information you can find from industry. Yep, and capability statement example, the first bullet, simply put, is what work the vendor can successfully accomplish, right? What are they known to do? What do they have experience in doing? What's their specialty? That's what are they capable of? And labor category example, the bullet 2, this is a pretty good detailed description of the LCAT. In this specific example, the vendor is explaining in detail what their biologist 1 can successfully perform. And the third bullet is agency experience example. Does a vendor have a history or expertise of performing the service in question? Understanding your requirement combined with information or input from vendors that successfully perform similar requirements is a holistic approach to your market research and our scope review process. And the next slide will also have more resources for you folks. And I think this is very helpful, something that we also access on a daily basis, which is the National Customer Service Center. If you don't know where to start, NCSC is our Tier 1 help desk. If you have questions and do not know where to start or look, you can always email NCSC, and we have technicians that can route your inquiry to the team that can best address your questions. If you want to reach out to us directly, the PSHC division, category division, you can email us directly as well too in the professional services email group. And for scope review, the second bullet, this is the link that you can use for PSHC, or in this case, non-IT services, to put in a scope review, which we'll do a quick run through after this presentation. And some other resources, professional services webpage, PSHC, that's where you will go and get information on all the solutions we provide. And of course, buyers resources as well too. And in the next slide, in this portion of the information and resources, we talk a little more into the actual contracts. As mentioned, Oasis Plus, you can access information as well as interact.gsa.gov. And once again, the links to the eLibrary and GSA Advantage, the two tools that we professional service advisors use on a daily basis to obtain some key information on a scope review. With that said, I'm going to do a quick run through. We'll hold questions until after the run through of the scope review, and we'll reconvene. In the meantime, I'll share my screen with you folks and give you a quick tutorial. Here, I've already went into the scope review page of GSA's website. You could easily Google scope review GSA and it'll take you where you need to go. But in this case, let's go ahead and click on this Oasis Plus scope review online form. It says Oasis Plus, but once you click on it, you'll see all the solutions provided by GSA PSHC division. As you can see, we have Oasis Plus and HCAS and MAS. Let's say for this example, let's say you are an agency in need of a management advisory consulting requirement. And you heard about this new great contract, Oasis Plus, or you may have used Oasis and be very happy with it, and you might want to explore Oasis Plus. So for this example, let's do that. And as mentioned, this is a management advisory. So let's say Oasis Plus Manager Advisory. And also you could click multiple solutions. Some people, some folks just do one. Some folks do a couple different. For this example, let's do both Mass and Oasis. So in this case, we'll do Mass Office Management. And self-explanatory, do you have a particular small business or set-aside goal, which a lot of agencies do. In this case, let's do small business. And here, this is where you're providing your input, where you think that NAICS should fall under for this particular requirement. And you've done some research. So let's say you heard about the 541611 O. O for this particular one is Office Management Needs and Assessment and Analysis Services. So let's click on that. And for Oasis Plus, let's say Administrative Management and General Management Consulting. So you do need to put some information here. We ask that you provide a brief summary of the principal purpose of this requirement. You can, some people just copy and paste the scope or focus or history, or some folks are a little more detailed and provide everything that they've done up to that point and what they're trying to do. So please provide us maybe a paragraph or two whenever you get a chance. And this right here, new requirement or follow on. The only difference is if it's a new requirement, you just select that and move on. If you choose follow on, we request that you provide a previous contract number. And this goes back to that background, understanding the history, right? Let's say for this one, this is a new requirement. And it's a firm fixed price. And of course, you could select anything. If you don't have the answer at that moment, most of these selections do have a undetermined or not known at this time type option as well. So base year dollar value, let's say it's 1 mil. Total will be, let's say, 6 mil. And for option years, solicitation, we'll go with August 1, anticipated award date, let's say September 30th, cutting it close for the acquisition team. Information, so this is just a little bit more detail that we need, you know, as we discuss those detailed information that we would like to receive from our customers to help the process along. In this case, is it commercial? Let's say it's both, right? Do you have a single or multiple award? We'll do a single award. Is it a requirement seeking established BPA? And in this case, we'll say no, because if we select BPA, that excludes the Oasis. Does your requirement require ODCs? We don't quite know at this time, but let's just say yes for now. Let's say 10%. And this is where you would provide your email. And this is a little more detail, just asking if you work with Assisted Acquisition Services, which is a division within GSA that does basically cradle to grave acquisition for it's a fee for service. And you'll know if you work with an AES person or not. It's usually for very large projects, but in this case, let's say it's no, you know, so a few $1 million. But let's say you have been working with a GSA CSD customer service, and let's just say Brittany's our customer service that you've been working with, right? And just put additional office info and Salesforce. That's kind of some internal information that we like to keep track of, but you don't have to have that information, so you can move on to next. And you're a federal government organization. Just select what pertains to you. And let's say this was a DHS initiative, right? And let's say it's for FEMA. Buying office name, let's say FEMA. Let's say it's Washington. And is the POC the same as the buying agency contracting officer or contract specialist? And this is simply are you the person that's going to be putting in the order? Are you the person that's going to be signing on the dotted line, or the OCO, or the customer team, right? And in this case, let's say yes. And the last part of this is where you attach your statement of work or PWS, and also your IGCE. And if you have any additional information, some folks like to put the source of salt notification, or maybe a history detailing the acquisition process up to that point, or whatever additional information that can be helpful to the reviewer. And also some additional information on, do you have any additional notes for the SME, which is for us. And that's all you need. And you click submit request. Without me talking, I probably could have done that in like 3-4 minutes. But I just wanted to run this through with you folks to see, to show you guys how simple it is, and how quick it is. Very easy. And then it gets routed to us at GSA and get assigned to a PSA, and we'll be in contact with you during the process as well. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Alyssa for any
Hello.
questions and answers.
Yeah, it looks like most of them were answered by our other PSA, Brian. But I think there may be more questions coming in that we could answer live, perhaps. The first
Yeah.
one is, what is the timeline for a review after submission?
So we generally like to say we can knock out a scope review within 5 days, 5 business days. Sometimes we can do it within a couple of days, but some of the larger, more complex ones can take up to a week or two, depending on the information provided by the customer, what type of dialogue we need to have, etc. But kind of the rule of thumb is about 5 days or so.
All right. Thank you for answering that, Jay. Let's see if there are more questions. I don't see any coming in at the moment. Oh, there's another one. Can you share the link in the chat to get into the system?
Yes, certainly can. I'll do that right here.
Okay. Okay. Looks like we have another question coming in. Would you like me to read it out loud, or you're still grabbing the link for the previous question?
I can take it, Alyssa.
Okay, sounds good.
So it says, is the scope review performed by a GSA contract specialist? Does this review being performed include attorneys? So the scope reviews are performed by our PSAs, our professional service advisors. So myself, Jay, and we have 3 other PSAs on our team. Brian is one. He has been answering some questions in the chat. So we will be answering and completing those scope reviews. And we do not, they're not reviewed by attorneys at all on our side, unless there's something in there that we think is maybe a legal matter that needs to be run by an attorney, but normally we do not. All right, there's another question in there. It says, I cannot see the link to the slides. Where would I locate it? We can post those back into the chat if anyone logged in late.
Yes, we've also shared the scope review, this slide in the webinar chat room as well, for those folks that missed that part. And one more roll call for any Q&A. No, we don't need a particular IGCE template. Um, Sometimes we get a PDF one pager saying, hey, we think this is how much it's going to cost per year, and these are the labor categories. Sometimes we get a very detailed IGCE on a very complex spreadsheet. So it's what you have that you can share with us that'll be tools that we can use to better provide you with information that you're requesting.
Another question came in, can local cities use this service?
Yes, as you saw in the options, we do allow GSA solutions to be used by state and local, or in many cases, city. New York City is a big user of GSA services as well. They have a good relationship with our GSA office in New York. And also it's open up to tribal groups as well, too.
Another question, would you turn in RFP or RFI?
Yeah, so actually we don't return neither one of those. We provide a scope review to better help you understand and to build your RFP, or in some cases RFI. So this is a scope review is a tool or resource that you can use to help build your acquisition strategy or acquisition plan.
Okay, are you using RS means data when reviewing IGE and providing comments?
I'm not too familiar with RS means data. Can you spell that out for
Tyler,
us?
feel free to clarify.
I think what the information that'll help Tyler is that when we're using the IGC as a PSA providing a scope review, we're largely looking at the labor category, not necessarily the cost, but we're looking largely at the labor category and hours to be performed by that FTE. That'll help us better understand what is the principal purpose and what is going to be what labor categories or personnel will be doing the heavy lifting. And this kind of goes back to understanding what percentage of your requirement is going to be work X, what percentage of your requirement is going to be work Y, and so on. And that's how we use an IGCE as a PSA.
Now, it looks like Tyler rewrote his question. How do you determine that the unit cost data is appropriate and what is the baseline for it?
Yeah, generally speaking, that's usually done by a contract specialist at the OCO, or ordering contracting officer, at the customer. When you're putting an acquisition plan together, part of the contract specialist duty is to understand cost and do a cost comparison, right? And that's not necessarily something that we as PSAs provide. We can assist, most certainly, with information that you may be seeking, but generally speaking, once again, we use IGCE for particularly the labor categories and the level of effort for a particular personnel or SME.
Oh, looks like there's been a pause in questions coming in. I guess we will wrap it up. There's no more. And you guys can always ask additional questions at professionalservices@gsa.gov, our group email. Well, it looks like I'm gonna close this session out. Thank you, Jay and Brittany, for this wonderful presentation. It was very informative with the resources you provided and the additional links and examples that were shared. And thank you all for taking part of our monthly Office of Professional Services and Human Capital categories, office hours. Our next office hours will be next month on June 12th, and the topic will be on the Calc Plus pricing suite. And as a reminder, you'll receive the 1 CLP following the webinar. It'll take 7 to 10 business days. And as a note, this webinar recording will be posted on our PSHC YouTube playlist, Office Hours, in about 3 weeks. You'll get feedback, a survey following this session. Please fill it out so we can improve our office hours. And thank you so much for joining us this month. We'll see you in June. Thank you.